In the quiet hours of a rainy August night in 2011, a small town in northern Vietnam became the scene of an unspeakable tragedy. It wasn't just the brutality of the act that left the nation reeling. It was who committed it. A 17-year-old boy, seemingly ordinary, carried out a plan so calculated and chilling that it would go down in history as one of Vietnam's most infamous crimes. This wasn't the story of a hardened criminal. It was the story of a teenager driven by desperation and recklessness who turned a family's home into a nightmare. A jewelry store, chosen for its accessibility, became the setting of a tragedy that would devastate not only the victim's loved ones, but an entire country. The shocking part? The storm that night wasn't just in the skies above. It was in the actions of someone no one suspected. Hidden within the chaos was a calculated plan, where moments of hesitation intertwined with relentless decisions that would haunt those who survived. The aftermath didn't just leave physical scars. It raised questions about justice, morality, and whether redemption was ever possible. As we revisit this chilling case, the weight of that stormy night looms large, unraveling the complexities behind a crime that shook an entire nation to its core. Bac Giang, a quiet province in northern Vietnam, had always been known for its simplicity and calm. Families worked hard, children played in the streets, and life moved at an unhurried pace. In 2011, however, this serenity was shattered in a way no one could have anticipated. At the heart of it all was LUYEN, a teenager from an unremarkable background, whose actions would leave an indelible scar on his community and the nation as a whole. LUYEN was born into a modest family, with parents who earned their living as butchers. Those who knew him described him as an ordinary child. Quiet, perhaps a little shy, but far from the kind of person one might associate with a horrific crime. Yet, as he entered his teenage years, cracks began to show. Struggling in school, LUYEN dropped out before finishing his education. By the age of 17, he had started down a troubling path, marked by reckless spending and mounting debt. Desperation can lead even the unlikeliest individuals to dark places, and for LUYEN, the pressure of his financial troubles grew unbearable. His debts became a crushing weight, and in his youthful short-sightedness, he saw only one way out. The target of his plan was the Bac Beach jewelry store, a well-known establishment owned by a local family. It seemed, at first glance, like an easy mark, a small shop with a little external security and a family of 4 living quietly above it. To the casual observer, the Bac Beach jewelry store was just another small business in the neighborhood. But to LUYEN, it represented an opportunity, a solution to his problems, albeit a devastatingly misguided one. The shop, situated on a modest street corner, was not flashy, but it held what he sought: gold, jewelry, and the promise of a financial windfall that could solve his debts and restore a semblance of control to his spiraling life. What LUYEN could not have foreseen, or perhaps refused to consider, were the lives that would be forever altered by his actions. The family that owned the shop, husband, wife, and 2 young children, were known for their hard work and dedication. They were a cornerstone of the community, their store a symbol of honest labor and persistence. To the people of Bac Giang, they were more than shopkeepers. They were neighbors, friends, and loved ones. The night of August 24, 2011 was marked by heavy rain, the kind of storm that drowns out the usual sounds of the world and makes even the smallest town feel eerily isolated. It was under the cover of this storm that LUYEN set his plan into motion, carrying with him not just tools of theft, but also a dangerous determination that would lead to a crime far beyond what anyone could have imagined. As the storm raged on, so too did the internal conflict within this 17-year-old. In hindsight, many would wonder, was there a moment when he questioned his actions, when he could have turned back? Or was the die already cast, his desperation too overwhelming to allow for second thoughts? These are the questions that would haunt not only the investigators, but also the community left to pick up the pieces after his actions. The story of what happened next would become one of the most shocking chapters in Vietnam's criminal history. Not just for the brutality of the act, but for the ripple effects it caused. It was a case that would force the nation to confront difficult questions about youth, accountability, and the limits of the justice system. The Bac Beach jewelry store, once a symbol of stability and prosperity, would forever be remembered as the site of a tragedy that changed everything. Under the cloak of darkness and heavy rain, LUYEN approached the Ngak Beach jewelry store with a carefully calculated plan. Armed with a backpack containing a machete, a knife, and a flashlight, he had spent days observing the family's routines, memorizing their movements, and identifying potential entry points. His target was clear, and so was his intent. The storm provided a perfect cover for his actions, muffling sounds and masking his presence as he prepared to break into the store. At around 2 a.m. on August 24, 2011, LUYEN began his ascent. He climbed the steel bars decorating the shop's facade, using them as a makeshift ladder to reach the third-floor balcony. With the machete in hand, he pried open the door and slipped inside. His initial movements were slow and deliberate, driven by the need to remain undetected. Every creak of the floor, every shadow cast by his flashlight, heightened the tension of the night. On the third floor, where laundry was hung to dry, he paused. The rain had soaked him, and the weight of his plan seemed to hang in the air. He left his backpack and shoes in a corner and began searching the house. His first sweep of the upper floors yielded nothing valuable. Undeterred, he made his way down to the second floor, carefully opening doors and rummaging through cabinets. The silence of the house was both an advantage and a warning. He knew the family was home, likely sleeping, and that any misstep could awaken them. At this point, LUYEN discovered the home's surveillance cameras. Realizing they could capture his movements, he turned his attention to the electrical panel and cut the power to disable the cameras. Darkness enveloped the house, but his flashlight continued to guide him. Returning to the upper floor, he lay in wait, a predator biding his time until the right moment to strike. Around 5 a.m., the household began to stir. The first to wake was the father, Nguyen Van Ngak, who climbed to the third floor to retrieve laundry. It was here that he encountered LUYEN. Startled, Mr. Ngak attempted to confront the intruder, but LUYEN was ready. A struggle ensued, violent and chaotic, as the two fought in close quarters. Despite being caught off guard, Mr. Ngak managed to wrestle one of the knives away, even injuring LUYEN in the process. But the teenager, driven by fear and adrenaline, struck back with his machete, delivering fatal blows. The noise of the struggle woke Mrs. Chin, Mr. Ngak's wife, who rushed upstairs to investigate. Upon seeing her husband under attack, she attempted to intervene, but LUYEN turned his focus to her. With the same weapon, he silenced her cries for help, leaving her lifeless alongside her husband. The brutality of the moment was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the quiet household that had existed just minutes before. As the chaos unfolded, the couple's children were also drawn into the nightmare. Their youngest, a baby just 18 months old, was injured in the commotion, but miraculously survived. The older child, Bae, tried to call for help, but was intercepted by LUYEN, who saw the attempt as a threat to his escape. Despite the violence he had already unleashed, the teenager's actions against Bae were calculated to prevent any chance of discovery. After ensuring that no one in the household could resist or alert authorities, LUYEN turned his attention to his original goal, the gold. He descended to the first floor, where the jewelry display cases were located. In the aftermath of his rampage, the silence of the house was broken only by the sound of glass shattering as he smashed the cases and emptied them of their contents. He stuffed approximately 50 gold items into his backpack, a grim prize for the night's atrocities. With the valuables in hand, LUYEN made his escape. He climbed back up to the third floor, retracing his entry route, and slipped out into the rain-soaked morning. Bloodied and injured, he fled the scene on foot, leaving behind a trail of devastation. The crime scene he left was one of unimaginable horror. A shattered family, a ransacked home, and a silence that spoke louder than words. Hours later, neighbors discovered the aftermath. The sight of the injured children and the lifeless bodies of Mr. Ngak and Mrs. Chin sent shockwaves through the community. The police were called, and an investigation was launched immediately. The case, with its brutal details and tragic loss of life, quickly became a national focus. Every piece of evidence, every detail of that night, painted a picture of a crime that was both methodical and senselessly violent. Blood samples found at the scene, including those not belonging to the victims, provided a crucial lead. The presence of an unidentified individual's blood suggested that the perpetrator had been injured during the struggle. This clue would become the cornerstone of the investigation, guiding police as they worked to unravel the identity of the person responsible. As news of the crime spread, fear and outrage grew. The Bac Giang jewelry store became a symbol of shattered safety and innocence, and the hunt for LUYEN began in earnest. Detectives followed the trail of blood and interviewed locals who might have seen or treated someone with injuries consistent with a struggle. Their efforts soon bore fruit, leading them to a local clinic where a young man had sought treatment for suspicious wounds on the same morning the crime took place. It was here that the threads of the case began to come together, weaving a narrative of a desperate act with devastating consequences. As investigators pieced together the events of that fateful night, the case of LUYEN became more than just a story of a robbery gone horrifically wrong. It raised pressing questions and sparked endless speculation about the motivations, decisions, and circumstances that led to such a devastating crime. Why did a teenager, once described as quiet and unremarkable, commit an act so heinous that it shocked an entire nation? And could anything have been done to prevent it? One prevailing theory centered on desperation. By the time LUYEN targeted the Bac Giang jewelry store, he was deeply entangled in financial troubles. He had accumulated significant debt from gambling and reckless spending. With no job, no education, and no means of paying back what he owed, he may have seen the crime as his only escape. But desperation alone couldn't explain the level of violence he exhibited. Why didn't he simply steal the gold and flee without harming anyone? This is where the case took a darker turn. Some analysts argue that the brutality of the crime indicated a complete lack of empathy. Once inside the home, LUYEN didn't just focus on the valuables. He made calculated decisions to eliminate any potential witnesses. His actions were not impulsive or chaotic. They were deliberate. He waited, observed, and acted with chilling precision. This raised the question: was this purely a crime of opportunity, or was it an expression of something deeper, something more unsettling? Others speculated that the environment LUYEN grew up in may have played a role. Coming from a modest background with parents who reportedly struggled to provide stability, some wondered if his upbringing had left him vulnerable to poor decision-making and susceptibility to external pressures. Yet, many individuals face similar challenges without resorting to such extreme actions. This led to further debates about whether societal factors, such as the stigma of financial failure or the lack of mental health support, may have contributed to his downward spiral. Another key aspect of the analysis focused on the legal system and its handling of juvenile offenders. LUYEN was just 17 years and 10 months old at the time of the crime, which legally classified him as a minor. This distinction spared him from the death penalty, sparking outrage among the public, who felt the sentence of 18 years in prison was too lenient given the severity of his actions. Critics of the law argued that it failed to account for the calculated nature of the crime and the lasting impact on the victims' families. On the other hand, supporters of the juvenile justice system maintained that its purpose is to rehabilitate rather than solely punish, emphasizing the potential for reform even in the most challenging cases. The broader implications of the case also came under scrutiny. In the years following LUYEN's arrest, there were reports of other young offenders referencing his crime, seeing his sentence as evidence that severe consequences could be avoided by committing crimes before turning 18. This raised concerns about whether the legal system unintentionally created a dangerous precedent. Lawmakers and legal experts debated whether reforms were needed to address such loopholes while maintaining the balance between justice and the rights of minors. Forensic psychologists offered another layer of insight, examining the potential mental state of LUYEN leading up to the crime. Was he fully aware of the consequences of his actions? Did he comprehend the gravity of taking lives in pursuit of material gain? His ability to plan the robbery, disable security systems, and execute his escape suggested a level of forethought and awareness. Yet, the sheer ruthlessness of his actions hinted at a psychological detachment, a suppression of moral reasoning that allowed him to carry out the crime without hesitation. The community, too, became a focal point of analysis. Many questioned how someone with such dangerous tendencies could go unnoticed for so long. Were there signs that were missed? Could intervention by teachers, friends, or neighbors have made a difference? The tragedy highlighted the importance of recognizing red flags in young individuals, particularly those struggling with isolation, financial hardship, or behavioral changes. The case of LUYEN is a chilling reminder of how quickly desperation and poor choices can escalate into something unthinkable. It forced a nation to confront uncomfortable truths about its laws, its society, and the vulnerabilities of its youth. As the dust settled, one thing became clear. The ripple effects of this crime extended far beyond the Ngok Beach jewelry store, leaving lasting scars on both the victims' families and the country as a whole. The story of LUYEN is not just a crime that shocked a nation. It is a mirror reflecting the complexities of human nature, societal pressures, and the legal system. As the case drew to a close with his sentencing to 18 years in prison, the reactions were as divided as the questions it left behind. While some saw his punishment as a failure to deliver justice, others viewed it as a necessary adherence to the principle of rehabilitation, especially for minors. Both perspectives offer valid points, but the tension between them underscores the difficulty of balancing accountability with compassion. For the families of the victims, the pain of their loss remains immeasurable. The community, too, was left grappling with the fear and unease that followed the crime. Many questioned how such an act could occur, whether the legal system was equipped to handle such cases, and what measures could be taken to prevent similar tragedies in the future. The public's outrage over the perceived leniency of the sentence reflected a broader concern about the adequacy of the laws designed to address crimes committed by young offenders. As LUYEN serves his sentence, society is left to ponder whether true justice has been served. The passage of time has not diminished the haunting nature of his actions or the impact they had on the lives he forever changed. What happens when a person like LUYEN is released? Will he be reintegrated into society, or will the stigma of his crime shadow him for the rest of his life? These questions challenge us to reflect on the broader implications of crime and punishment. This case also raises important discussions about early intervention and support for troubled youth. Could someone have intervened before LUYEN's life took such a dark turn? Could programs aimed at addressing the root causes of desperation, such as poverty and lack of education, have made a difference? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are essential in understanding how society can better protect both potential victims and individuals at risk of making irreversible decisions. The story of LUYEN forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that extreme actions often stem from complex, layered circumstances. It reminds us that behind every headline is a series of moments, choices, and missed opportunities that lead to tragedy. More importantly, it challenges us to ensure that such moments do not define our future, encouraging society to seek solutions that promote understanding, prevention, and accountability. As we reflect on this case, we must ask ourselves, how can we create a society where such acts are less likely to occur? How do we support both justice and the potential for redemption? The answers are far from simple, but the questions are ones we cannot afford to ignore. By engaging in thoughtful dialogue and learning from the past, we have the power to build a safer and more compassionate future. The case of LUYEN is not an isolated incident in the global context of juvenile crime. Around the world, societies grapple with similar dilemmas. How to handle young offenders who commit severe crimes while balancing justice, rehabilitation, and the long-term effects on victims and their families. Comparing LUYEN's case to others internationally reveals both shared challenges and unique aspects of Vietnam's legal and cultural landscape. For example, in the United States, juvenile offenders who commit violent crimes often face the possibility of being tried as adults, depending on the severity of their actions and their state's laws. This approach, while offering stricter punishments, has sparked debates about the psychological development of young people and the ethics of sentencing minors to life in prison or even capital punishment. By contrast, Vietnam's laws, influenced by cultural values and international conventions on children's rights, prioritize rehabilitation for offenders under 18, even in the face of public outrage. Another case worth noting is that of James Bulger, a 2-year-old boy from the United Kingdom whose tragic death in 1993 at the hands of two 10-year-olds raised global awareness of the complexity of addressing juvenile crime. Public response to the case, like that of LUYEN, was deeply emotional and divisive. In both instances, the crimes left a lasting impact on their communities and highlighted the tension between legal limitations and public demands for justice. Such comparisons emphasize that juvenile crime is a multifaceted issue requiring nuanced approaches, while the emotional response to these cases is universal. The ways in which different societies navigate the line between punishment and reform reflect their unique cultural and legal priorities. Vietnam's handling of Le Van Nguyen, though controversial, illustrates its commitment to treating minors differently within its justice system, a principle that, while imperfect, seeks to preserve the possibility of change. As we bring this story to a close, it's crucial to recognize the lessons it offers. The tragedy of the Nha Trang Beach jewelry store serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked desperation and a lack of support for at-risk youth. It also underscores the need for ongoing conversations about how we, as a global community, approach juvenile justice. Whether you view Le Van Nguyen's sentence as too lenient or appropriately measured, the broader takeaway is clear. Prevention is key. By addressing the root causes of crime, supporting vulnerable individuals, and fostering stronger community ties, we can reduce the likelihood of such tragedies. Let this story be a catalyst for action and understanding. If this case has sparked questions or thoughts, share them in the comments below. Discussions like these are vital to finding better solutions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more in-depth explorations of the stories that shape our world. Thank you for watching, and let's continue seeking justice and understanding together.